Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Data Dialogues. I'm Julian Redmond, General Manager at Certus Insight. For today's episode, I've decided to repurpose a session I recently recorded for the Data Vault Alliance. As you might know, Certus is one of the founding partners of the Data Vault Alliance in Australia and New Zealand. I was joined by Kent Graziano, Chief Technical Evangelist and Strategic Advisor at Snowflake, and one of my Certus colleagues, James Hartwright. We had a conversation about data lakes, Data Vault 2.0, and our Iris platform. Iris is a combination of the Data Vault 2.0 processes and methodology combined with technologies like Snowflake and Warescape. So here's my conversation with James and Kent. Hi Kent, thanks for joining. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. Kent Graziano, I'm the Chief Technical Evangelist at Snowflake. I've been with the company for a little over 4.5 years now. Prior to that, I've been in the data space doing analytics, data warehousing, modeling, and architecture design for over 25 years. Started working with Oracle technologies back in the late 80s and eventually got introduced to Bill Inman and the concepts of data warehousing, and then Claudia Imhoff, and then Dan Lindstedt, and got introduced to Data Vault. And so I've spent, several decades now helping build analytic platforms for customers as a consultant, but I've also worked in internal organizations as a tech lead and chief architect for some very large data warehouses. And the last 4 years have been a great ride with Snowflake, seeing customers all over the world adopt the cloud data platform and really try to empower their organizations with better access to data and analytics.
Yeah, very cool. And James, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm James Hartwright. I work for the Strategy Innovation division within Certus Group called Cognition Studio. Interestingly, I've also been with the company for 4.5 years. My longevity is a little bit longer. I'm past the 30-year mark in working with data, but similar, I think, to Kent in that I've done a lot of data warehousing, a lot of trying to get what's now called data ops and data in the hands of users and in the hands of data scientists, and get their outputs integrated into the business. So I do a lot in Australia, New Zealand, in mid-market area, so medium-sized businesses, as well as those tier one, top-end banking, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I'm here primarily to sort of give with Kent up there at the top end and the extensibility and massive capability. I'm probably going to be throwing in a bit more of the hassles that those smaller businesses hit upon.
Yeah, sure. So Kent, let's get started. The term data lake is pretty widely used, but maybe a little less well defined. Can you kind of provide a view of what your view of what a data lake is?
Sure. For one, I always tell people it's a concept. It's not a technology. And I run into a lot of people that kind of equate data lake and certain technologies. And it's like, no, it's really a concept. And it's the idea of having a central repository where you can put all your data, structured, semi-structured, unstructured, all kind of in one place at scale for a very low cost. That was the original idea, because it was just too expensive to try to do that in the traditional databases. But part of that concept was also that you didn't do transformations. In the data warehousing world, we always talked about ETL, and now we talk about ELT, with T being transformation. And the idea with the data lakes is that you would just store the raw data as it was, and additionally, hopefully that it could be in a sort of schema on read sort of capacity, that you didn't necessarily have to define a whole bunch of structures before you loaded the data. And that allowed organizations to really leverage that data to load it very quickly. As soon as they got new data sources, they could load it in. And that was kind of like the ideal for what we would do with a data lake versus a highly structured data warehouse that would take some time to develop and evolve.
And so, James, does that fit with your definition of a data lake?
Yes, very definitely. The 12 months ago, I would also throw in that most of the data lakes that we saw either very quickly or over a period of about 12 months became swamps.
Yes.
That piece of providing the data and providing the data to those business users who were begging for the latest, greatest, newest data as quickly as possible. We've seen it over and over again where an IT organization will go, okay, let me do that for you. The data lake is here. I can provide that data as quickly as possible. But all of that rigor that we've always had in the IT side of guarantee of delivery of data, just even basic things around metadata description, and as Kent said, the transform part. Where does the transform part go in a data lake? Well, in recent times, it's gone into the hands of the BI users or the data scientists, and in a lot of cases, repeated, hidden away. So I'm seeing it a lot less now. The rigor is coming back in, and the maturity that we always had in the data warehousing space is coming into lakes. But yeah, I'd agree with Kent's definition of what it is. Yeah,
cool. All right, so Ken, I guess then you get to see lots of people trying or using data lakes. So what's working well, what's not, who's doing well with them?
Well, I think like James said, there's the danger of a data lake turning rapidly into a data swamp, right? And that's what I've seen with customers who coming from on-prem systems that pretty much that's what they had is they had the data swamps because the technologies that they were using at the time just didn't allow for, I'll say, true metadata capture. And again, as James really pointed out well, is they ended up building data silos, and this whole the BI community and even the data science community getting their hands on the raw data is great, but when they're each applying different rules or applying what they think is the same rule in a different way, we end up with disparate results. And so that was a big challenge. And so what people today I'm starting to see, especially within the customers at Snowflake who are able to do some of their data lake in Snowflake on the platform and their data warehouse. And so you're able to kind of have the best of both worlds. You get the raw data in as fast as possible and have that there and have some access for the people who need to do data discovery and really look at that raw data in its raw form. They have that available at scale, but we also can then take and evolve that data into a more curated, analytics-ready sort of repository, whether you want to call that a data lake or a data mart or something like that. But evolving it, keeping the lineage so you know where the data came from, and so it's kind of expanded quite a bit now to something that Claudia Imhoff a number of years back labeled something the extended data warehouse. And well, at the time I thought it was a great concept, right? It really encompassed all of this schema on read and schema on write and all these sort of logical data zones. I don't know if I want to call it extended data warehouse anymore because people put a lot of meaning in the word data warehouse and they don't think data lake and data warehouse go together. And in my world, I think they do. I mean, it's a data platform. It's really an extended data platform now to encompass all of these different kinds of use cases that go from needing the schema on read in the raw form versus the curated data that we need for regulatory compliance, for financial analytics, customer 360s, all of the things that the companies need to do with their data really to get value out of that data. Just sort of the whole end-to-end life of the data from raw form to something curated, but in a much more hopefully controlled manner, so that we don't have the data swamp, that the data lake really becomes sort of your persistent staging area, where the data is not changing, but still there's some metadata around it. You know where it came from, you know when it landed there, and it's not a mystery anymore. With Snowflake, of course, we have people doing that, and they can access it with SQL, which just makes it so much easier, right? They can write a SQL statement. There is a table name, even if you're dealing with schema unread. There's table names and what look like column names, and that's more metadata than people had looking at a flat file or a CSV file and going, okay, what is that? We're trying to figure out how many attributes are there in that CSV file. Well, okay, we got to count the commas.
So not just a random file system. So James, would you add anything else to what you see as what's working well and what's not with data lakes now?
Yes. The bits that are working well are, as Kent said, the consideration of things like a curated and conformed or whatever name you want to give to it, and the different users, and very definitely the different users where the data scientists wanting that initial discovery in the raw data, some of the BI tool users wanting, as soon as data arrives, if I run a query, I want it on the most up-to-date data that's arrived, and I will live with the potential quality control things that might occur. And then the third group, usually finance, hey, I just want the thing that shows at 9 a.m. every day. I just want the cut of what is a coherent set of data. So fulfilling all of those sets of users and their use cases with that continuous flow of data coming through into the data lake. The other piece that's in there, it's very interesting going in and talking to data scientists and saying, right, we've got the lake, we've got all this great data and source A, source B, source C. So how talk to me about the flow and the structure. You go, well, and what they will usually do, well, first of all, I'll do a few SQL queries. And so there's, I don't know whether it's because this is the way that they've learned and been brought up, but the SQL, the structure that it gives you, the ability to very quickly cross-reference and slice and dice and put your favorite BI tool, it's still a very powerful capability and one that goes in as adjunct to the raw data. If I'm building out a time series machine learning model, of course, I need that data to be replayed as it came in. But the underlying core, slowly changing data, the demographics and the like, the product holdings, they come in together. So yeah, the data lake, the data warehouse, and the combination of the two, it truly is. It's just tools in the toolkit. And I think we're slowly getting to the position where the data that I look in the data lake, the data I look in the data warehouse, I can understand what it is. And as Kent said, I can see the lineage. I can see what's been applied to those as either data fixes or integration, so that I understand the decisions I'm making on top of that data. We're getting there.
Yeah, definitely. So Kent, you mentioned the words cloud data platform, and I've seen that Snowflake's describing their platform now as a cloud data platform. What does that mean from a Snowflake perspective?
Yeah, well, when we started out, we were known as the data warehouse built for the cloud. But really, when our founders created Snowflake and started building it, they had a much more expansive vision. But you got to start somewhere, right? When you're new. So we started with data warehousing because there was a desperate need in the market for a more performant platform for doing data warehouse, data mart type analytics workloads that was going to be in the cloud. But even from the first day, first week that I was at Snowflake, and learning about our variant data type, which is the patent pending data type that we have that allows you to store semi-structured data in a column in a table. So you just load a whole JSON document into a column. We had customers using that schema on read capability to do their analytics. And so they really were taking kind of a hybrid of I'll say the data lake concepts and the data warehousing concepts. Even like I said, in the first couple of weeks I was at Snowflake, I ran into this. And so people have really been kind of doing what we would have constituted data lake work in Snowflake since day one. Same with data science. As soon as we had our Spark connector, people were doing data science against Snowflake. And so our conversations now are about having a cloud data platform. So one place where you can have all of your data to support what are really different workloads and different use cases. So the data lake use case, the data warehouse use case, the data science use case, data engineering, being able to stream the data through all of that from the sources, through a lake, to a warehouse, to a mart, and then potentially now onto a data exchange for data sharing with other customers. All of that's in one wrapper inside of Snowflake. And it really, like I said, it's always been there. But now we're kind of trying to expand that vision based on certainly what we've seen the market needs, but also what we've seen our customers doing for the last 5 years. They've been doing this. And I joke all the time with people who are trying to build software, and Snowflake's no different. Customers won't always use your product the way you envisioned it.
Yeah.
And in cases like this, sometimes it works out really well that the customers have gone beyond and really seen the innate power in the original vision and going, hey, well, we could do this. And then they go and do it. And so we really, very quickly realize it's like, we're not a data warehouse, because data warehouse professionals have a view of what a data warehouse is. Having Claudia's architecture, the extended data warehouse, certainly opened my eyes to, well, yeah, there's stuff beyond the data warehouse, but it does really fit within the same ecosystem. And now with Snowflake, it's like, not only is it the same ecosystem, it's the same product. And so hence the cloud data platform, the place where you can put all of your data for all of these different workloads and eliminate all the silos.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a great name, and I think it sums it up pretty well. And I'm certainly a big fan of the data sharing capabilities and many of the other aspects in Snowflake. Okay, James, to you, where does DV2 fit in this picture then of a cloud data platform?
Yeah, it's when Dan was out here in Australia just before we got into lockdown. It's been a really interesting journey of the ideas that Dan had in the 90s and refined in the early 2000s, how they're ringing true for me in the way that we're running data engineering today. That Dan definitively got right. We're going to be in an insert-only world. We're going to be in a schema-on-read world. That transformation and business rules are going to be critical in organizations being able to show compliance and regulatory processes. And we've always known the model's been great and the extensibility of that model, but the architecture and the methodology are truly coming to the fore. When we're in this world of hey, I've got some new data, bring it through, help me connect it. That ability to get the data in, to be able to have an irrefutable match back to source, to get the eventual RI and show where any RI anomalies have occurred. And probably for me, the strongest one across the BI and the data science community, the what would be known in most other terms as schema drift, as attributes get added or existing content get changed. The ability to identify that and build on top of it and build layers on top that bring that data back into reconciliation is just great for me to stop all of those curious user queries. Where did this data come from? What did you do to it? And the other part in that, the speed, not necessarily one of the 3 or 5 V's of data lake, but just the fact that the methodology you've got repeatable processes, repeated processes, and once you understand Data Vault, you know where function needs to go. That means that your build process is just repeatable from a development and a testing and a debugging perspective. It just really, for me, truly brings it together, both in our traditional batch and as we're moving into the real time.
So that's really the data ops piece, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like, obviously we're trying to help organizations be actually agile rather than just use agile as a term, but actually, deal with change and rapidly deal with change and have their business react quickly by having the data in their hands. Is there any more to that, you think, that where DV2 fits, Kent?
Yeah, I mean, in sort of this confluence of data lakes and data warehousing into a full platform, as James said, the architecture, right, and the fundamental architecture of a Data Vault 2 system includes a staging area, a raw vault, a business vault, and information marts. And really, what I see happening here is that the data lake is the staging area for the vault, right? And that's where all that raw data is going, except that now it's going to be a persistent staging area rather than a transient staging area. And then applying the Data Vault modeling techniques and patterns is your data warehouse. But because of the approach, it allows you to build that data warehouse in a truly agile, incremental fashion without a high risk of re-engineering. So you can be onboarding all kinds of new data into your data lake, and based on the business requirements, then build out that piece of the data warehouse using the Data Vault methodology to load that data into a form that can then be then transformed, applying the business rules in the business vault and the information marts. And as that schema drift inevitably happens and that data it's landing into your lake, following the Data Vault patterns, you can insulate the end users from anything suddenly breaking on them. Because you can evolve the vault by adding a new satellite or adding a new link, adding a new hub as these new attributes come up, and it can be done in conjunction with the business. And what's the business requirement? It's great to get all this new data into your lake, but if the business doesn't really need it, well, it doesn't really need to go into the warehouse and therefore into the vault. But if they do need it, then you put that into your next iteration and you evolve the vault model and then evolve what they are able to see and make it, sort of an end-to-end, very, very thin slice from the lake to the raw vault, to the business vault, to the information mart. And what I see people doing with Snowflake is they're using views for a lot of this. So they'll build out a physical data vault, but the business vault may be views because those rules change. And then the reporting layer, it's been really interesting to see because it's, the theories that Dan had, like you said, he came up with this stuff in the 90s and we started doing it a little bit in the early 2000s. And getting people out of doing things the old way of thinking that a analytic system has to be a dimensional model. Well, certain tools require dimensional models because they were built expecting it. So you can build a view on the vault that looks like a dimensional model. And now you can decide, you don't even have to have a final decision. Is it a type 1 or a type 2 dimension? Well, if nobody knows, you can just go with type 1. And if they decide 2 months later that, well, we really need type 2, the data is already in the vault, and you just change that view to a type 2 view. And then the data is miraculously there. But if they're wanting to extract it to, say, something like SAS, well, you can just flatten it all out into a big denormalized structure. And the part that I find, I think, well, I guess rewarding is probably the right word for it, is that it's still a single source of data because the vault is that source. And what they're seeing is views. And so those views are going against the same data. So whether it's denormalized or a star schema or Snowflake style schema or a type 1 dimension or a type 2 dimension, it's all pointing back to the same data. So, regardless of the presentation of the data, the fact of the data is the same. And it's eminently more traceable than it was before. And now you've got, no longer you've got a data swamp, you've got a data lake that's actually, I'll say, flowing downstream from the lake into a man-made reservoir that's the data vault. That allows us to put some parameters around it and put some metadata around it and put some governance on it, right? To control people's access to it and help the business get the real value out of that data that they threw over the wall, threw over the dam into the lake, right?
I like Dan's analogy where he uses lenses on the data. I mean, you can have this year's lens and next year's lens, and you can always run next year's lens against this year's data if you need to for comparison and those sorts of things. So all right, I'm just sticking with you, Kent, for a sec. So we're thinking about an organisation that's got, they've got their data that they have currently, but then they have partners that are supplying new data sets or other things. And they have Snowflake, cloud data platform. What else do they need to add to that mix to have a really well-functioning data vault within Snowflake?
Well, hopefully automation of some sort. As James said, it's all these repeatable patterns that Dan has published over the years, and just the nature of the data vault structure itself. If you really truly want to be agile, I don't know how you can do it without some level of automation, both on the the modeling side, the workflow side, the data engineering side, and then, as James was kind of alluding to earlier about data ops, being able to automate some of that, automated regression testing, putting all of that in place so that we can really, solve problems for the business as quickly as possible, and make sure that we're doing it right with quality and with rigor. And in my mind, there's no better way to have rigor in the process than to automate it, right?
Yeah.
There's no human error. There's only human error in programming the automation. But once the automation is in place, it's repeatable and it's predictable. And that's going to allow us to really to make progress and make good use of the data. And so all of that, and this is where, customers, the customer choice of, what do we use for our data pipeline? Mm-hmm. Are we doing streaming? Are we doing batch? Are we going to go with traditional sorts of ETL approaches, which I think we're arguing fairly well right now with this architecture we've been talking about from lake to vault. It's really definitely an EL architecture and very little T. So do you do that with a streaming tool, a replication tool? And those are some of the decisions people need to make. And then on the output side, of course, what tools are we going to use to access the data? Are we going to use a data science tool of some sort? Are we going to use a BI tool or a visualization tool or a statistical analytics tool, or all of the above? Because we have many different requirements and constituencies within the organization who have different ways they need to look at the data.
Yeah, cloud data platform should service everyone. James, is there anything else you'd add to that list?
Yeah, I'll add the word I still hate because of the connotations it's bring, which is governance. I'll move to the nice side of governance, the data quality side. So just understanding that there are going to be lots of people, lots of users who are depending on the data that you've provided to them, and once you've built a level of trust, you really do need to keep that inherent level of trust there. And putting in data quality rules as part of that process, as you're bringing critical entities and critical data elements up through to data marts or data representations for the data scientists, that thinking about applying data quality rules on top of that data, not just the initial, hey, look, it's sort of all right, we should probably go back and fix some of that source data, but tracking it and trending it ongoing. Because you want to be the first one to know that something's gone a bit dodgy with the source system that's been providing you data. So embedding that data quality, and I do. If you don't know about non-invasive data governance by Robert Siner, go and have a quick read of it. There's some really good, strong pieces that are in that agile level, in the maturity level of starting to implement levels of governance through data quality, through reports, and then back through to stewardship, and then on to business casing. Look, can we just go back and fix the source so that it's corrected data capture, so that we don't need to rely for the business rules downstream? So bringing that in as part of the code automation, the publishing of the lineage and the tracking, and the presentation of what we've done to this data to get it to you in the nicest form possible. That would be the only bit I'd add to Kent's piece.
Yeah, great. Okay, so if we're thinking about a platform that that has a cloud data platform like Snowflake, and it has automation, and it has modeling capabilities and metadata management, and it has the DV2 standards and processes, and it has a lake component and a warehouse component. What do we call that? Is that the extended data warehouse, Kent, or is that a logical data warehouse, or is there a better term for something like that?
Wow. It sounds that's like a full product, right? Yeah. I mean, it's that's when you add that on there. That's a I hate to use this term because Bill Inman and Claudia Imhoff had the corporate information factory, right? And what you're describing is like that is the information factory, right? That's what it is. And that was an architecture they were talking about, but this is more of a real thing. It's more of a product, right? That includes, it's running on a cloud data platform, but it's applying the governance rules and the modeling rules and the data quality rules. If you put that all together, then that really, if you go to look at one of the old corporate information factory architecture diagrams, it had all of this stuff about metadata and data quality and experimentation and exploratory warehouses. All of that was in those diagrams, but it was all conceptual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of moving parts and a lot of different tools and a lot of different repositories in many cases, because you couldn't do it all in one place. And I think, that's, I guess, one of the beauties that we've gotten with the cloud is, we can now actually start to do all of that in one place and not have nearly as many moving parts. Yeah,
absolutely. James, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought I was going to get away without Kent mentioning it, but the word I've been tending to use that has very few connotations, positive or negative, is repository. And that there is a level of repository. Again, it's not a here's your enterprise data warehouse fixed, nobody can touch it. Here's the lake that's a bit loosey-goosey. The repository concept, in that there is still order to the data. There may be some bits that are ordered and structured better than others, but as a person coming in and looking at the repository, you have an understanding of what's where and whether this palette in the corner is actually useful to you for the job that you're doing. If you're fabricating something, manufacturing something, then go and hit the raw stuff. If you want just the finished product to go out and sell to your customer, go to the shelf with the finished product things. But the repository word is one that I'm using a lot that nobody's really complained about as yet.
Yeah, that's a pretty safe one. I think I've used that one in the past too. And there was times when data warehousing was a dirty word, and so we just called it. I had a place where we actually called it the district information factory and the district data repository, things like that, rather than saying data warehouse.
Yeah. So I guess this end-to-end supply chain of information and all the tools you need. Obviously, what we've been doing with Iris, trying to bring some of the leading tools like Snowflake and Warescape and others together with the process embedded, is heading in that direction. Otherwise, organizations need to still kind of build it themselves. So look, really, had such a great conversation with you both. Thank you for giving me your time today. And hopefully we'll do another one of these shortly. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to access additional resources on today's topic, be notified when new episodes of Data Dialogues go live, and access valuable information management resources and news, head over to certussolutions.com/data dialogues, or follow the link in the description. I hope you'll join me on the next episode.